So this is something I've wanted to do for a really long time. I just haven't had the time to. This video is for you if you're someone who owns a horse via boarding, meaning you don't have your own stable, you depend on other people to care for your horse on their property. You've entrusted in them. This video is not geared for you if you're someone who owns a stable and you're tired of your boarders and you think you're a martyr for being able to water horses in 10 degrees. Here's one story that I have that just completely blew my mind. So the context was I was at a barn that was having some electricity problems. They just didn't have enough juice, and the paddocks, including the one my horse went into, didn't have electricity. And around here, things freeze, okay, in the winter. So this was winter, and their trough was, one of those giant, big plastic troughs, and it froze and it broke. Big crack in it. So they decided they would use muck buckets for a while, and pretty much immediately that did not work out very well. So my horse had a muck bucket in his paddock, and they put a heater in that muck bucket. It was not a floating one, like the floating plastic thing looked like it had broken off or something. And it was just the open coils, the open heated coils in there. So obviously it sunk to the bottom, right? So this heater, like, I go out one day and it's like in the afternoon. My horse has been out all day long. It was around, 4:30. And I come out there and this muck bucket is turned on its side. The heater is like thrown out. Maybe my horse potted out of there or something. And it was like in the mud, like there's 6 inches of mud in there. It's a whole nother story. It's smoking in the mud. My horse is looking at it and just standing there going, what's going on? He had no water. Obviously he was thirsty because he was poking around that stuff. The wire was like half chewed. There was exposed wires just laying there in the mud for my horse to get into. I looked at the muck bucket and there was the coil-shaped figure 8 burned at the bottom of this muck bucket. So literally he had not had water. It burned a hole through the bottom, and he was looking for water, kicked it over, and kicked that heater out. I mean, all the things that could have happened. Luckily my horse didn't colic from lack of water. Luckily my horse didn't put his foot and his shoe through that heater and get stuck. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, he didn't get electrocuted, thank God. So, as soon as I discovered this, the barn manager came out and was all like, I something about like he forgot to water that day or something, or he knew he watered. I can't remember what it was. I've totally blocked it from my memory because it was so bad, but he was out there just, all rattled, making excuses because he knew this was so bad. And, I just got my horse out of the paddock and went about my way. But that was only one small thing that this particular barn had done. The list went on and on and on. So another different type of horror story that I had was I came out to the barn one day and found my horse literally dripping in sweat from nose to tail, even around his eyes. His whole face was sweat. He needed a sweat scraper. He was in his stall. He had just eaten dinner. I couldn't believe that he was fed grain like that. None of the other horses were this way, so something happened specifically to him. I was out there totally by myself. I don't know what had happened to him, but this is a horse that always would meet me at the stall door, happy to see me. I opened the stall door and, with the halter in hand, and he flipped out and ran into the back of his stall, literally turned around and ran into the back of his stall. I couldn't believe this was happening. So clearly he had faced a lot of trauma. I don't know what it was. So I, go in there. He finally calms down a second. I get him out into the cross ties. And even just me stepping in front of him, just making a small movement, he spooked. It was insane. So the first thing I did, I was like, okay, change of plans tonight. Obviously, we're not riding, right? I'm going to try to, calm this guy down. This is so traumatic. So, hosed him down. He was very, very hot, very, very sweaty, hosed him down, got him calmed down, spent time with him, all that kind of stuff. It was just traumatic. I was almost in tears to see him this way. So a couple months later, I was riding and the barn manager was walking horses in from pasture in the evening and randomly said, "We finally got your horse back to where we need him," or something along those lines. We had an electric fence incident with him a couple months ago, and it all came together. Oh my God, something seriously traumatic happened to my animal. No one told me. I showed up to that type of animal and they had an electric fence incident with him. Like, oh my God. Oh my God. And that also explained, normally this horse comes in and out of pasture just fine, but he was pulling this weird thing with me where I'd open the gate and he was like rushing through the gate. He wanted to get the heck out of Dodge, when I'd bring him out of pasture. It all finally added up. With that electric fence incident, I believe it was the beginning of his ulcers. This was a horse that rode so beautifully and we had such a great partnership, but all of a sudden he was different. Didn't want to move forward, didn't want to move off the leg. He was revolting to that. It was just like fingernails on a chalkboard. Well, I was kind of like, I kind of connected the dots, I took him, for some analysis. He passed everything with flying colors, flexion tests, everything. We did some x-rays. Everything was good. Well, I finally was like, let's check him for ulcers. Let's scope him. Because some of these things just seem like maybe it's ulcers. Sure enough, this horse had grade 2 ulcers, glandular, pylorus ulcers, squamous ulcers, and I'm pretty sure it was that incident where I found him all stressed out, like freaking out. It was probably that incident. It was after that he started displaying the symptoms. And so there went 5 figures. And so he was prescribed with sucralfate and omeprazole, so ulcer guard paste, right? So I had these tubes out there. I had a supply, luckily, immediately took them out there. I left the 8x11 sheet that came from the vet. I put it in the feed cart for the barn manager. I texted the barn manager saying, here's the diagnosis and here is the dosage and what he's going to have. Here's the stuff. I put it also in your feed cart. I put the omeprazole in the feed cart, all of it, right? So days go by and I check, and of course he's supposed to get 1 full tube of the omeprazole per day. And it was like I saw 1 and like a quarter tube was gone after all these days. I'm like, what are they doing? Feeding him a quarter tube a day or something? No amount of figuring it out added up to the number of days. Like, it wouldn't have been half a tube, it wouldn't have been quarter tube, it was nothing added up, okay? All I knew is he was not getting close to the dose that he needed, and it was documented. I wasn't even going to fight about the medication. Like, if a barn manager is not going to follow your written instructions, your text instructions, or any of it, there's no need to argue. It's just get your horse out of there and go find a place that's going to take care of them in their time of need. The lack of care and the lack of calling me and telling me that something had happened, the lack of all of it, it absolutely cost me 5 figures, and it was complete negligence. So the purpose of this video is to have some kind of camaraderie out there. I know that I have a lot of friends who've been through similar circumstances as me, and I know that there's so many more people out there who are suffering in silence. People who are going to the barn each day and seeing the mistreatment of their horses, and there's not a lot they can do about it. And it sounds crazy to an outsider because normally with services like that, you go find another provider, and you hold them accountable or things like that, or but with horses, it's a completely different industry if you're watching this video right now, and it is sometimes a hot mess. And those of us that care about our animals and we have to own a horse via boarding, we get in some very difficult situations sometimes. So this is all about talking about it, and tell me in the comments what your experiences are. Have you experienced any of the same stuff I have? Because if so, I want to know. That's part of why I'm doing this video. How widespread is this?